When I bought the house in the suburbs of Fairview, Oregon, I thought I'd finally found the peaceful escape I'd always dreamed of. No noisy neighbors, no blaring car horns, no pointless drama, just me, wide open space, and a simple single-story house I'd always wanted to fix up myself. I'm not the type to enjoy living crammed into crowded neighborhoods. I wanted a place to breathe, a place where I could hear the gentle lapping of water against the pool's edge, instead of other people living their lives. And this house, with its private backyard pool, was everything I'd hoped for. Before diving into the story, comment where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss the latest video. I dreamed of a place like this for a long time. After years of living in cramped city apartments, where privacy was just a distant concept, I wanted a space of my own. No one peering in, no one judging, no one interfering. This house was the reward I gave myself after saving up for so long, and the pool was the centerpiece of that dream. I pictured afternoons floating in the water, feeling the coolness wash away all my fatigue. The first time I stood in the backyard, watching the pool water reflect the sunlight, I felt a peace I hadn't known in years. I imagined lazy weekends where I'd soak in the water, letting every stress melt away with each ripple. I thought about inviting a few close friends over, but mostly I wanted to keep this place to myself, a sanctuary where I could escape the world. I never could have guessed that dream would soon be put to the test. When I moved in, I thought I'd left behind the hassles of city life. Nosy neighbors, absurd rules, unnecessary drama. But I was wrong. Just a few days later, I realized my peace wouldn't be as easy to hold on to as I'd thought. I still remember the first day Linda Grayson showed up, like a strange breeze blowing through the calm I'd just started to enjoy. I was unloading the last few boxes from my car into the house, sweat dripping down my forehead, hands gripping a box full of old books I planned to shelve in the living room. The steel gate creaked as I opened it to grab more stuff, and then I heard footsteps on the gravel path leading to the front yard. I looked up, mildly annoyed at being interrupted, and that's when I saw her, a middle-aged woman with neatly curled blonde hair, wearing a striped blouse and beige slacks, holding a foil-covered dish. Her smile was so bright I could sense the awkwardness from a few meters away. "Hi there," she said, her voice high-pitched like she was trying to impress someone. "I'm Linda Grayson, president of the Pinewood Heights HOA. I saw you just moved in, so I thought I'd come say hello." She held up the gift like an invitation. "Homemade cookies, welcome to the area." I set the box down, wiped my hands on my jeans, and stepped closer. I'm not one for small talk with strangers, but I didn't want to come off as rude on my first day here. "Thanks," I said, taking the cookies. The faint scent of vanilla wafted from under the foil, and I had to admit it made me a little hungry. "I'm Ethan Carter. Nice to meet you." Linda nodded, her smile still plastered on, but her eyes darted past my shoulder toward the backyard, where the pool sat quietly behind the steel fence. "Oh, I just wanted to introduce myself," she went on, her voice oddly sweet. "I live over in Pinewood Heights, right across the road. You've seen those matching houses over there, haven't you? We like to keep things around here looking real nice, real tidy." I frowned, unsure where she was going with this. Pinewood Heights was half a mile away, far enough that I didn't feel tied to its identical houses and the rules I'd heard about. "Yeah, I've seen them," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. "But I'm not part of that. My house is private property, not in the HOA." Linda laughed. A short, sharp sound like I'd said something odd. "Oh, of course not," she said quickly, waving her hand exaggeratedly. "I know that, but you know being good neighbors is always important anyway, right?" She tilted her head, looking at me with an enthusiasm I could only describe as over the top, like she was waiting for me to agree. I gave a half-hearted nod, not wanting to drag this out. "Sure," I said, picking up the box as a hint that I needed to get back to work. "Thanks for the cookies. I appreciate it." I turned to walk away, but Linda's gaze didn't leave the backyard. I could feel her stare like a tiny drill, trying to bore through the fence to see the pool I hadn't even shown anyone yet. "No trouble at all," she called after me as I stepped inside. "If you need anything, just come find me at Pinewood Heights." Her voice echoed behind me, but I didn't look back. I shut the door, set the cookies on the kitchen counter, and sighed. I didn't think much of the encounter at first. Linda seemed a bit overly eager, sure, but I figured it was just her way of welcoming a newcomer. I'd met people like that before, the type who poke their nose into others' business, under the guise of friendliness. I told myself it was just harmless small talk and got back to unpacking, eager to jump in the pool soon to cool off from the day's heat. But when I peeled back the foil and took a bite of a cookie, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off about Linda's smile. It was too forced, too deliberate, and that phrase she'd used, being good neighbors, it kept echoing in my head, though I didn't know why at the time. I spent most of my time fixing up the place, painting the living room walls a light gray, scrubbing the kitchen floors, and of course tending to the pool. I loved watching the clear blue water sparkle in the sunlight, knowing it was mine alone. But the old steel gate leading to the pool area felt clunky, rusted in spots, and it creaked annoyingly every time I opened or closed it. I decided to spend an afternoon fixing it up to make it look less rundown. I was scrubbing the rust off the gate with a wire brush when I heard the crunch of gravel under someone's feet. I looked up, mildly irritated at being disturbed, and saw Linda standing there, a few steps away. She wore a thin pink sweater, holding a small gift box wrapped in green paper, and that familiar smile was back, bright, awkward, and making me uneasy. "Hi, Ethan," she said, her voice as high-pitched as before. "I see you're keeping busy." I brought another little gift, just a small welcome gesture. I stood up, brushed my hands on my jeans, and took the box. It was light, probably more baked goods or something. "Thanks, Linda," I said, trying to sound polite, even though I just wanted to get back to my task. "You didn't have to do that." I set the box down next to a paint can, ready to keep scrubbing, but Linda didn't seem inclined to leave. She stood there, peering over my shoulder, her eyes locked on the pool behind the fence. "Oh, it's nothing," she replied, waving her hand exaggeratedly, as if brushing off my thanks. Then she tilted her head, eyeing the steel gate with an odd curiosity. "You know," she started, her tone turning syrupy, "some folks at Pinewood Heights were telling me about this gate. They were wondering why you keep it locked. It's such a shame to keep a pool that nice all shut away." I frowned, stopping mid-scrub and turning to face her fully. "A shame," I repeated, not sure if I'd heard her right. "This is my private property, Linda. I lock the gate because I like my privacy." I kept my voice calm, but my mind was already replaying our first meeting, that forced smile, the good neighbors line ringing like a warning bell. Linda's smile faltered for a split second, but she quickly brightened up again. "Oh, of course I get it," she said, her pitch rising slightly as if to soothe me. "I was just saying, I mean, this area's so lovely, and your pool, it's really a standout. The folks at Pinewood Heights love walking around here, taking in the scenery, enjoying the vibe, and with summer coming, maybe they'd all like a little dip, you know, like good neighbors." There it was again. Good neighbors. I let out a short laugh, unable to hold it back, though I tried to make it sound polite. "I like my privacy, Linda," I said, picking up the wire brush as a sign the conversation was over. "I'm not planning to open the gate for anyone, but thanks for checking in." Linda nodded, but I could see her lips tighten slightly, like my answer wasn't what she wanted to hear. "Oh, of course," she echoed, her tone a bit stiffer. "I just thought it'd be nice for folks to enjoy it. But if that's how you like it, I understand." She paused, eyeing me for a moment longer, then added, "If you need anything to spruce this place up, our HOA has plenty of resources. Just call me if you change your mind." I didn't reply, just gave a curt nod, and turned back to the gate. Linda's footsteps faded down the gravel path, but I could feel her gaze lingering on my back. Once I was sure she was gone, I straightened up, looking at the pool through the steel fence. The water shimmered in the late afternoon light, peaceful and still, just how I wanted it. But that peace now felt tinged with unease. Then one afternoon, everything changed. I was in the backyard, holding a long pole to skim a few dry leaves off the pool, a routine I did to keep the water clean. Birds chirped in the trees near the steel fence, and the air carried the faint scent of freshly cut grass from somewhere distant. I just looked up to check for any stray leaves when I heard the water splashing louder than usual. I frowned, turned around, and nearly dropped the pole when I saw two strangers, a woman about 40 and a man a few years older, swimming in my pool like it was a public park. "Excuse me," I called out, striding toward them. "What are you doing?" My heart pounded, half with anger, half with confusion. They flinched, water splashing as they scrambled to the surface. The woman clung to the pool's edge, her wet hair plastered to her face, while the man stood awkwardly mid-water, clutching a cheap orange float. "Oh, sorry," the woman said, her voice shaky like she'd been caught stealing. "We didn't mean to bother you. Linda said it was okay, that you wouldn't mind if we swam a bit." She looked at me with a mix of embarrassment and hope, like I might smile and tell them to carry on. "Linda said what?" I asked, my voice hardening. I set the pole down, crossing my arms, trying to stay calm though my mind was spinning. "Linda Grayson." "Yeah," the man cut in, now climbing out and dripping water onto the tiles around the pool. "She said this was part of Pinewood Heights, that the pool was open to residents. We just wanted to try it out. Sorry if we got it wrong." He raised his hands like he was surrendering, but I didn't care about their apologies anymore. All I could hear was Linda, and open to residents. I stared at them, speechless for a few seconds. This was my private property. I'd checked the deeds, paid for it, locked the gate. How dare Linda tell anyone my pool was communal? This isn't part of Pinewood Heights, I said, my voice cold but steady. This is my private home, and I didn't give anyone permission to come in. Please leave now. They mumbled more apologies, grabbing their towels and stuff before slipping out through the steel gate I was sure I'd locked earlier. After they were gone, I checked the gate. The lock was intact but the hinges were loose, meaning they'd probably climbed over. I stood there, staring at the pool, now still again, but the peace was gone. In its place was a simmering anger. Linda had lied to them, deliberately sent strangers into my backyard. But why? Was this a dumb misunderstanding, or was she up to something bigger? I went back inside, grabbed my laptop, and pulled up the footage from the security camera I'd installed near the gate after my last run-in with Linda. I rewound a few weeks, and sure enough, there she was, standing outside the gate one evening, holding a notebook, scribbling something, while glancing at the pool through the fence gaps. She didn't do anything but stand there, but the sight made me shiver. I'd thought Linda was just nosy, but now I wasn't sure. She was clearly fixated on my pool, and those two strangers showing up wasn't a coincidence. I shut the laptop and looked out at the backyard through the window. The pool water sparkled in the fading light, but for the first time it didn't feel entirely mine anymore. Linda had crossed a line, not just with words, but with actions. I didn't know what she wanted, but I knew I had to find out. After those two strangers left my pool, I couldn't sit still anymore. The simmering anger from yesterday had turned into a small flame. Linda wasn't just nosy or spouting empty lines about good neighbors. She'd crossed a boundary, sending people into my backyard like I had no say over my own property. I couldn't let this slide as some silly mix-up. I needed answers, and I needed them now. I decided to go straight to Pinewood Heights to confront Linda. I'd done my homework. Their HOA office was in a small house at the center of the neighborhood, less than a mile from mine. I threw on a light jacket, stuffed my keys in my pocket, and headed out. The afternoon air was cool, but I didn't feel its comfort. All I could think about was those two strangers swimming in my pool, their voices echoing in my head. Linda said it was okay. I marched down the gravel road, past the identical houses with their neatly trimmed lawns, until I reached the HOA office, a low building with a small sign out front that read Pinewood Heights HOA. I knocked on the door, and a young woman opened it, probably a secretary or assistant of some kind. "I want to see Linda Grayson," I said, my voice harder than I'd intended. She nodded, and led me into a small room, with a desk and a few chairs. Linda appeared a few minutes later, stepping in with that familiar smile, bright, forced, and this time I could see a hint of nervousness in her eyes. She was wearing a green sweater, her hands clasped in front of her chest as if trying to maintain her composure. "Ethan, what a surprise to see you here," she said, her voice as high-pitched as ever. "Is something wrong? Are you here to join our upcoming HOA meeting?" She tilted her head, the smile never leaving her lips, but I wasn't about to let her steer the conversation. "No, I'm not here to join anything," I cut in, crossing my arms. "Yesterday, two strangers were swimming in my pool. They said you told them it was open to Pinewood Heights residents. Can you explain that?" Linda's smile froze, just for a split second, but I caught it. She blinked, then quickly regained her cheer. "Oh, it must be a misunderstanding," she said, her tone soft like she was soothing a child. "I might have mentioned your pool when chatting with some folks. You know, it's so nice, but I never told anyone they could go in there. They must have misinterpreted me." I stared at her, not buying a single word. Her tone was too smooth, too rehearsed, like she'd practiced this excuse beforehand. "Misinterpreted," I repeated, my voice colder. "They specifically said you told them this was part of Pinewood Heights, that I wouldn't mind if they used the pool. That's not a random misunderstanding, Linda. What did you say to them?" Linda waved her hand, letting out a small laugh as if I were overreacting. "Ethan, I swear I didn't mean anything by it. Maybe I made a little joke, and they took it seriously. You know how people can mishear things." She leaned toward me, her eyes brightening as if trying to win me over. "I'm so sorry if that upset you. I'll talk to everyone, and make sure it doesn't happen again." I didn't buy her explanation. She was too at ease, too quick to dismiss it, and I remembered the camera footage. Linda standing outside my gate, taking notes, eyeing my pool like a predator. But I didn't have solid proof to accuse her right then, so I just nodded, keeping my voice steady. "I hope so," I said. "This is my private property, Linda. I don't want anyone crossing that gate without permission." Got it, got it, got it," she replied, her smile snapping back like it had never left. But before I turned away, she added, her voice suspiciously sweet, "You know, if you ever want to join the HOA, we'd love to have you. It'd make things simpler for everyone, don't you think?" I stopped, looking at her. It wasn't an invitation. It was a hint, a trap disguised as friendliness. "No thanks," I said, my tone firm. "I'm fine keeping things as they are." I turned and walked out, not waiting for her response. As I left the office, I felt Linda's eyes on my back, and for the first time I realized this wasn't just a misunderstanding. I got home with an uneasy feeling I couldn't shake. Her forced smile, her slick denial, the way she'd suggested I join Pinewood Heights. It all felt like pieces of a puzzle I didn't fully grasp yet. I wanted to believe the strangers in my pool were a fluke, that Linda would back off after I'd shut her down. But my gut told me she wasn't one to give up easily. Things started escalating a few days later. I just brewed a cup of coffee and stepped out to the front yard to check the mailbox. Part of my daily routine. Amid the pile of ads and bills, I found a letter with no clear sender, just my name, Ethan Carter, handwritten on the front. No HOA logo, no postmark, just a plain white envelope. I frowned, tearing it open right there, and when I read the first line, I nearly dropped my coffee. The letter was typed, no formal letterhead, but the message was clear enough to make me both furious and amused. "We, the members of the Pinewood Heights HOA, respectfully request that you reconsider allowing limited community access to your pool," the first line read. "This would greatly benefit the neighborhood, fostering unity and aligning with our community's aesthetic and recreational goals." Below that was Linda Grayson's signature, followed by a long list of other names, at least 20, some scrawled by hand, others printed like they'd been copied from somewhere. This wasn't a letter, it was a petition. I stood there staring at the paper, torn between laughing and losing it. The idea that I'd open my pool, private property I'd sweated and saved for, to all of Pinewood Heights like some public park was beyond absurd. I flipped the page over, looking for any sign it was a joke, but there was nothing beyond the signatures and fake formal wording. Part of me wanted to rip it up right then, but another part felt a chill. Linda wasn't just nosy or lying to a few people, she'd rallied the neighborhood into this. What did she want? What was it about my pool that obsessed her so much? I brought the letter inside, set it on the kitchen table, and sat down to think. I remembered what she'd said at the HOA office. It'd make things simpler for everyone. This wasn't a friendly request. It was an organized push to pressure me into giving in. I started wondering what Linda had told those signers. Had she lied to them like she'd lied to the two strangers? And what did limited access mean? A few swimmers a week, or the whole neighborhood piling into my backyard like a picnic? I couldn't let this go on without doing something. If Linda thought a petition would make me unlock the steel gate and invite everyone in, she was dead wrong. I decided to act. First, I grabbed my laptop and checked the footage from the security camera near the gate. Just a few nights earlier, I saw Linda show up again, standing outside the fence, holding her phone, snapping pictures of the pool in the dim streetlight glow. She didn't do anything but stand there, but her look in the video gave me chills. It wasn't the look of a curious neighbor. It was the look of someone scheming. I called a local security company that morning. By afternoon they'd installed 2 more cameras, one in the backyard corner overlooking the pool, and one at the steel gate to cover every angle. I had them add motion sensor lights around the fence, the kind that flare up if anyone gets close at night. I also ordered some no trespassing, private property signs online, planning to bolt them to the gate and fence as soon as they arrived. After adding the cameras and motion lights around the pool, I started feeling like I could regain control. Linda Grayson's petition still sat on the kitchen table as a reminder, but I told myself that with the new security, she and the Pinewood Heights crowd would think twice before trying anything stupid. I settled back into my routine, working remotely from my refurbished bedroom, tending to the pool, and enjoying quiet evenings by the backyard lantern light. But that peace didn't last long. Just a few days later, I started noticing strange things around my house. First, it was trash. One morning, as I went to the backyard to check the pool water, I found a small pile of garbage just inside the steel fence, a few water bottle wrappers, a torn plastic bag, and an old pair of beat-up rubber flip-flops. I frowned, thinking maybe the wind had blown them in, but no gust was strong enough to toss a pair of shoes over a 2-meter fence. I swept it up, checked the camera footage, but saw no one. The motion lights hadn't triggered, and the angles didn't catch anything but tree shadows swaying at night. I brushed it off as a fluke, but unease started creeping in. 2 days later, I found another sign. While walking around the backyard to inspect the fence, I noticed one of the cushioned white lounge chairs by the pool was out of place. It wasn't just nudged. One leg had been dragged off, leaving a small scratch on the tile. I stood there, staring at it, trying to recall if I'd bumped it by accident, but I knew I hadn't. I'm careful with this area. It's where I unwind, where I keep things neat. I checked the cameras again, but once more, nothing. No people, no movement, just darkness and wind. I started wondering if someone knew how to dodge the camera angles, or if I was just imagining too much. But the incident that really set me off came a few days later. I was checking the pool as usual, skimming leaves with the long pole, when I noticed the water looked cloudier than normal. I leaned closer, and a sharp chemical smell hit me. Not the chlorine I use, but something harsher, like cheap soap or detergent. I checked the filter at the pool's corner, and it was clogged with a slimy gray gunk I'd never seen before. Someone had dumped something in my pool, not by accident, not by an animal, but on purpose. I straightened up, gripping the pole tight, feeling like the blood was rushing to my head. This wasn't trash or a shifted chair anymore. This was sabotage. I hadn't even calmed down when something else happened. That afternoon, I went to the mailbox and found a thicker than usual envelope, this time with the official Pinewood Heights HOA logo stamped in the corner. I tore it open right there, and when I read the first line, my anger flared like never before. "We have observed that the fence around your pool does not comply with HOA standards," the letter stated. "This fence encroaches on Pinewood Heights boundaries and must be removed immediately, or legal action will follow." The letter spanned 2 pages, packed with legal jargon and threats, signed by Linda Grayson, HOA president. I almost laughed at how ridiculous it was, but the anger quickly drowned out any humor. I'm not part of Pinewood Heights. I checked the property records when I bought the house, and my steel fence sits fully within my private land. Linda wasn't just sending petitions to pressure me. She was now weaponizing the HOA against me, claiming control over something that isn't hers. I brought the letter inside, set it next to the petition on the kitchen table, and sat down to think. I grabbed my laptop and opened the digital copy of my property records from my email. Everything was still clear. My lot is independent, outside any HOA jurisdiction. The steel fence didn't violate anything. It was there before I bought the place, and there were no notes about boundary disputes. Linda was making this up, or worse, she thought I'd cave under her baseless legal threats. She wasn't just sending petitions or lying to a few people. She was trying to use the whole HOA system to force me to give in. And the signs like the trash, the moved chair, and the tainted pool water showed she was willing to play dirty. I started with concrete steps. First I called Jake Torres, an old college buddy now working as a real estate lawyer in Portland. I told him everything over the phone. Linda's first visit, the strangers in my pool, the petition, and now this nonsense legal letter about the fence. Jake listened, interrupting occasionally for details, and when I finished he snorted. "She's got no claim to your property, Ethan," Jake said, "but if she's dumb enough to send a threatening letter, we'll make her regret starting this." Jake advised me to hire a surveyor to confirm my property lines, not just to protect myself but to gather ammo against Linda if she was lying about the fence. I agreed on the spot. The next day a guy named Tom from a local surveying company showed up with his gear. Tom walked around the steel fence, checking every angle, and after a few hours he handed me a detailed report. The results were no surprise. My fence was fully within my private property. No violations. But the kicker was Tom pointing out something unexpected. A small landscaping strip from Pinewood Heights, with some bushes and a "Welcome to Pinewood Heights" sign, was actually on my land, crossing the boundary by a few meters. I almost laughed out loud reading that report. Linda wanted to play the legal game. I'd give her a taste of it. With the report in hand I called Jake back. He drafted an official letter to the Pinewood Heights HOA, demanding they stop all harassment immediately and remove their encroaching landscaping from my land, with a warning of legal action if they didn't comply. "Send it," I told Jake. "But I want to do more than that. I want people to know about this." Jake agreed, and we planned a bigger counterattack. I went back to the security footage. Since adding the new cameras I'd caught a few suspicious moments. Linda standing outside the steel gate at night, snapping pool pics with her phone. Another time she was with a man pointing at the fence, like they were plotting something. I saved it all to a folder, along with the petition, the HOA's threat letter, and Tom's survey report. I didn't just want to defend myself. I wanted to expose Linda to all of Pinewood Heights and Fairview. I opened my laptop and wrote a long social media post, tagging the Fairview community page, the city council, and the official Pinewood Heights HOA page. The headline: HOA president tries to seize my private pool. I laid out the whole story from Linda's first visit with cookies, to the strangers swimming, the petition, and now the threats and sabotage. I attached screenshots from the cameras, scans of the HOA letter, and the survey showing their landscaping on my land. This is my private property, I wrote. I'm not in the HOA, but Linda Grayson is trying to force me to give in by any means. It's time this stops. The post spread faster than I'd imagined. Within hours, dozens of people commented, expressing outrage and support. A woman named Sarah Mitchell messaged me, introducing herself as a Pinewood Heights resident. I'm so sorry about this, she wrote. Linda pressured us into signing the petition, saying it was just a formality. I had no idea she'd take it this far. Another person, Mark Evans, called me directly. He was an HOA board member and admitted that Linda had used community funds to hire a lawyer to draft the threat letter, claiming it was for neighborhood improvement. We didn't know she was trying to take your land, Mark said, his voice thick with shame. She hid everything from us. After going public on social media and sending the legal letter through Jake, I felt like I had the upper hand. My post had stirred up a storm in the Fairview community, and messages from Sarah Mitchell, Mark Evans, and others showed Linda was losing support, even within Pinewood Heights. I figured the pressure from public opinion and the threat of a lawsuit would force her to back off. Everything blew up one night, a few days after my post. I was in the living room, reviewing camera footage to send to Jake, when the motion lights in the backyard suddenly flared to life. I leapt from my chair, heart pounding, and rushed to the window. In the blinding glow, I saw 3 figures standing just outside the steel gate to the pool. One of them, unmistakable with her curled blonde hair, was Linda Grayson. She held a large pair of bolt cutters in her hands, while the man beside her aimed a flashlight, and the third person stood watch like a lookout. I couldn't believe my eyes. She was actually trying to cut my gate's lock. I grabbed my phone, filmed the scene through the window, then immediately called the Fairview police. Someone's trying to break into my property, I told the dispatcher, my voice shaking with anger. They're at my backyard gate with bolt cutters. Please come now. I gave them my address, then ran to my desk to check the live camera feed on my laptop. The footage was crystal clear. Linda working the cutters on the lock, but it wouldn't budge. I'd replaced it with a new steel one after the stranger's break-in. She muttered something to the others, clearly frustrated, and I saw them start yanking the gate like they meant to break the hinges. Less than 10 minutes later, police car lights flashed down the road in front of my house. I ran to the front yard, pointing the 2 officers toward the gate. Linda and her crew froze as the headlights hit them, and I heard the bolt cutters clatter to the ground. We were just checking something. Linda shrieked as the cops approached, her voice high and panicked. I'm the HOA president. I have the right to inspect boundaries. But the officers weren't buying it. They told her to stand still, reviewed the footage I provided from the cameras, and when they saw Linda wielding the cutters, they handcuffed her on charges of trespassing. Watching Linda get led to the squad car, her face red with anger and humiliation, I felt a cold satisfaction. She glared at me through the window, but I just crossed my arms and stared back. The other 2, a man and a woman I didn't recognize, were questioned too, but they quickly blamed Linda, saying she'd told them they were just helping check the fence. The cops left me a report, promising to follow up if they needed more, and I went back inside, feeling both relieved and on guard. Linda had been caught red-handed, but I knew it wasn't over yet. The next morning, Jake called with even bigger news. He dug into city records, and found that Linda had filed a request with the Fairview City Council to annex my pool into the Pinewood Heights HOA, claiming it was poorly maintained, and better off serving the community. The request was submitted months ago, complete with sneaky photos of my pool, and a list of fake complaints from neighbors I'd never heard of. The hearing for her request was tomorrow, and Jake said we needed to be there to end this once and for all. Jake and I showed up to the hearing with a clear plan. I brought every piece of evidence. Tom's survey report proving my fence was legal, and the HOA's landscaping encroached on my land. Camera footage of Linda's appearances at my gate, the video of her arrest night, the petition, and the HOA's threat letter. When it was my turn to speak, I stood before the city council, voice calm but firm. I'm not part of the Pinewood Heights HOA, I said. Linda Grayson has harassed me, sabotaged my property, and lied to take my pool. Here's the proof. I presented each document, each clip, and the murmurs in the room grew louder. Sarah Mitchell and Mark Evans were there too, stepping up to testify. Sarah spoke about Linda pressuring her to sign the petition, while Mark revealed how Linda misused HOA funds to hire a lawyer and pay the people who joined her the previous night. The council listened, reviewed the evidence, and after an hour of deliberation, they ruled Linda's request was denied outright. Not only that, they launched an investigation into her conduct, especially the misuse of HOA funds, based on Mark's testimony. Leaving the hearing, I felt like a massive weight had been lifted. Linda didn't show, maybe she knew she'd lost, but I knew this was the end of her scheme. After long tense days facing off with Linda Grayson and the Pinewood Heights HOA, I finally got to enjoy the peace I dreamed of when I bought this house in the Fairview suburbs. Linda resigned as HOA president just days after the city council hearing, when the evidence I presented, paired with Sarah Mitchell's and Mark Evans' testimonies, crushed her ambitions completely. Her reputation was irreparably ruined in the community, not just for harassing me, but because the council's investigation revealed she'd embezzled HOA funds for years for personal gain. From a smug woman with a forced smile, Linda became the target of contempt, and I couldn't deny the satisfaction of watching her fall. To celebrate the win, I decided to throw a small poolside party, not to gloat, but to share the joy with those who'd stood by me in this fight. I invited Sarah Mitchell, the kind Pinewood Heights neighbor who'd bravely spoken out against Linda despite pressure from her own community. I also invited Mark Evans, the HOA board member, who'd abandoned loyalty to Linda, to tell the truth about her fund misuse. They weren't just allies, they'd become friends, people who understood the value of standing up for what's right. That afternoon Sarah arrived first, carrying a tray of homemade sandwiches she insisted I try. She wore a loose blouse and shorts, her sandals clacking on the tiles as she stepped through the steel gate. "Ethan, this place is even nicer than I imagined," she said, admiring the pool with a genuine smile. I don't blame Linda for wanting it, but the way she went about it was awful. I laughed, leading her to the lounge chairs, and pouring her a glass of lemonade. Sarah sat down looking around with an ease I rarely saw in folks from Pinewood Heights, where everything seemed bound by rules. Mark showed up soon after, holding a bottle of red wine he said was to toast getting rid of the Linda thorn. He wore a green polo and khakis, looking far more relaxed than the last time I'd seen him at the council hearing, when he'd been tense confessing the HOA's mistakes. "I still can't believe we let Linda get that far," Mark said, shaking his head as he sat beside Sarah. "She was obsessed with controlling everything. Even your pool. Sorry I didn't see it sooner." I clapped his shoulder, telling him it was done, and now was the time to enjoy, not dwell. We sat around the glass table, chatting and laughing as the sun faded into a golden-orange sunset. I played some light music from a small speaker near the pool, and the vibe turned warm and easy. Sarah shared stories of Linda trying to force Pinewood Heights residents to paint their houses the same color, for uniformity. While Mark added how she'd once fined a family for leaving a bike out too long. "She was a nightmare," Mark concluded, raising his glass. "But it's over now. Cheers to you, Ethan. You beat her." As dusk settled, I fired up the small grill by the pool to cook some steaks. The savory aroma mixed with the cool evening air, and for the first time in weeks, I felt completely at ease. Sarah and Mark helped set the table, and we ate and talked about lighter things, like plans to fix up my home office corner or ideas for planting more trees around the fence for extra privacy. No one mentioned Linda again, as if she'd faded into a vague shadow, no longer worth the attention. That morning, while checking the mailbox before the party, I'd found another envelope, this time not from the HOA but a handwritten note from Linda herself. The writing was messy, lacking the confidence of her earlier letters. "Ethan," she wrote, "I know I was wrong to try controlling your pool. I just wanted Pinewood Heights to be special, but I went too far. I'm sorry. No long excuses, no arrogance, just a clumsy apology, like she'd written it in a rush or shame." I held the letter, reading it over, but felt no pity. She didn't deserve forgiveness after what she'd done. Harassment, sabotage, threats. I tucked it into a living room drawer, keeping it as a victory memento rather than a peace offering. Now as the party wound down, Sarah and Mark said their goodbyes and left through the steel gate, leaving me alone by the pool. I cleaned up quickly, stacking chairs, washing a few glasses, then grabbed a thin blanket from inside. I stretched out on my favorite lounge chair by the pool, the one where I could watch the water shimmer under the moonlight. The gentle lapping against the pool's edge, the distant chirping of crickets, and the cool breeze all blended into a peaceful symphony I'd fought to keep. I closed my eyes, letting my mind drift with the triumph. Linda was defeated. Pinewood Heights was no longer a threat, and the pool, the heart of my dream, was still mine, untouchable. I thought back to my first days here, standing in the backyard imagining a life free of drama and hassle. Now after everything, I'd made that dream real. The steel gate wasn't just a barrier, it was a symbol of my resilience, of standing firm against those who'd tried to take what I cherished. I opened my eyes, gazing at the starry sky. A shooting star streaked across, leaving a brief trail, and I smiled. This was my home, my haven, and no one could change that anymore. I pulled the blanket higher, letting the stillness wrap around me, and for the first time in months, I fell asleep soundly on the poolside chair, knowing everything was finally as peaceful as I'd always wanted. The story of Ethan Carter and his battle to protect his private pool in the Fairview, Oregon suburbs reflects a very real aspect of life in the U.S. today. The tension between individual rights and community pressure, especially in organized neighborhoods like HOAs, homeowners associations. Linda Grayson, with her ambition to control Ethan's pool under the guise of community benefit, represents a type of person who sometimes abuses minor authority to impose their will on others, a phenomenon not uncommon in America, where HOA rules often spark controversy. In contrast, Ethan embodies the American, who values private property and privacy, willing to fight to defend it, from installing security cameras to facing Linda in a legal showdown. Modern urban life in the U.S., with the rise of gated communities and strict regulations, sometimes blurs the line between individual and collective, making conflicts like this all too common. The takeaway from this story isn't just about protecting your rights, it's about doing it smartly and steadfastly. Ethan didn't rashly tear up the petition, or smash the steel gate in a fit of rage. He gathered evidence, camera footage, survey reports, sought help from lawyer Jake, and went public on social media to leverage community pressure. It's practical advice for Americans today: when facing injustice, use technology, the law and the public as weapons. Ethan inviting Sarah and Mark to the victory party also highlights the value of building allies, not for confrontation, but to strengthen your stance. In a society that prizes individualism yet brims with social pressures like the U.S., patience, strategy and connection are key to holding on to what's yours. Just as Ethan safeguarded his pool, his little paradise, from Linda and Pinewood Heights. Don't forget to hit subscribe, so you don't miss the next neighborhood drama. Thanks for watching my driveway war. See you in the next video with more surprises from Willow Creek.